Hey Gems, it's a Daisy Fisher Samuel, and you're welcome to another conversation. Today's conversation is a compilation of mini essays. This is the lunar full moon, red lunar full moon just passed, and I love full moons because it is a period where whatever insights that I've had fully bloom and are then especially insights that I have been embodying, but then I now have moments of like metacognition in the sense where I think about beliefs and I audit said beliefs and how they impact me, and I review things and I look at my embodiment, like what is my body telling me also this, using my spiritual gifts and in relation to me serving as an emotional health guide or emotional healing guide, and also someone who supports women's reproductive health because it's all connected. So I'm recently back from a trip, and so I did not experience the full moon at home. I wasn't really able to carry out my full range of full moon like beauty rituals to ground in the energy of the full moon. I was able to carry out some activities like taking a moonlight walk and things like that, and meditation and prayer and things like that. But this conversation is not about the lunar full moon. It's just about the insights that I think the moon was able to really bring out. And over time, I've had many conversations in relation to our well-being, both unconnected.substack.com. I haven't decided what platform I'm posting. If I'm posting this in my new YouTube channel, Amplify Her Academy. If you're not following, go and follow Amplify Her Academy. Or I'm sharing this on Connected. I haven't decided yet, but let's see how the conversation goes. So I have a bunch of like mini essays. I haven't taken the time out to write them out, either handwritten or type them out in my notes, but they're in my head. I've been ruminating on them. But this conversation is going to be like now an essay, a bigger, larger essay that feeds in more insights from these numerous mini essays. So first is within the context of neurodivergence, this is going to come in a lot and how it impacts. I was going to title this conversation, were you a bad girlfriend or a female friend, or were you an undiagnosed autistic young woman with CPTSD? Now, I know. It sounds like a lot, but let's just pick the first things first. Like I said, I had a moment of metacognition. I was reflecting. I was reading something. Okay, this started... girl. Okay, this started... The insight, I think I began to embody the insight or began to shift my internal awareness to this, my body embodying this insight a couple of weeks ago when I realized like the whole world was crazy about Heated Rivalry, which I mentioned in my last episode on enjoying an easier and healthier life as a woman with ADHD, and especially as a Nigerian woman, and what that means for my life. Now, I read Heated Rivalry, Long Game, and other books in the Game Changer series way back in 2022 at the midst of a very busy time of my life, running a lot of like women rights advocacy campaigns. It was a book that helped me distress and helped me really ground myself in my queer identity and a really moving series of love stories between men. In a world where at that time doing a lot of women's rights advocacy, I was in proximity to men as powerhouses, power structures, and having to build a space where women are carving out a space for themselves to promote and secure, safeguard, and of course help with the sustainable implementation of women's rights. So it was this thing where like I was in proximity to men who are like gatekeepers of power, structural power, with women of power and influence, and in such spaces, certain like nuances or the multiplexity of your identity kind of shifts to more into a binary that will be more power or empowering under like patriarchy, right? So Heated Rivalry, read it, loved it, that's it. Then I realized that, oh, there's a series on it, watched the series, then went through a rabbit special interest hole of just watching as many analysis, reactions, feedback, even professional conversations on certain themes within like the series, the show series, or the show adaptation of the book, which I think does a great work of polishing, expanding the original book series, right? Now, you're wondering like how does all of, I'm not about to give you like a major video summary or audio summary of all the different content I read. No, it's not about that. But two things stood out for me. Number one, obviously I've known for years that I have ADHD, and I also have like autism, and so what we call AuDHD, which I also agree should be its own unique DSM classifications, because it's not just ADHD plus autism. But two insights came to me. Number one, watching the show, when Shane folds his clothes before he and Ilya, have sex. And I was like, oh, that didn't seem odd to me. Ilya's fond smile when he saw Shane do that, it just reminded me of some of my ex-partners. So when I was watching reactions, there were two types of reactions, where neurodivergent people were like, oh, that's very autistic. And I was like, oh, really? Then neurotypicals are like, that is so weird, that is so odd. And I was like, wait. So what? People just put their clothes on the floor before they get intimate? How are they going to wear their clothes afterwards? I just started thinking of all the things my mind would go to, the germ. I couldn't even focus on, like, I wouldn't even be able to, I would just disassociate during sex. So I would be thinking, the clothes is on the floor, like, ew, germs, dirt, ew, my precious fabric, ew, my delightful cloth, like, and I wear really gorgeous colors, lots of whites, pastels, and some vibrant colors. So I would see how, even as we're talking, I'm going down into this. Anywho, so that was the first insight. I was like, oh, there are lots of things that I do random, which I know, of course, but I didn't know they were like universally autistic. Let me put it that way. The second insight was I was reading a fan fiction, and in the fan fiction, the person was, of course, as fan fictions do, while they were canonically following the storyline within Heated Rivalry and the long game, they had their own spin on things. And there were all these things that were being said by the fanfic character that were signals of like affection or desire or attraction and interest. And it just hits me smack in the face about how I had received similar conversations from friends. Or people I considered friends who eventually like withdrew from me. It was like I got an answer to questions that I had. Do you feel me? I'm a very insightful person. Shout out to like my very delicious brain and how it processes information. But there's some things that it doesn't really hit me. And for a long time, when I was a bit younger, I say a bit younger, LOL, but when I was in like my earlier 20s, I lived with my sister in university, and also when I went for like service corps, so NYC. So my sister could interpret those things for me. Now, over time, I wasn't living with her all the time, so I think there were certain experiences where I was like, I didn't understand what that person's emotional reaction meant, and I just did not investigate. Do you know what I mean? I didn't have like a reference point or anything to be like, what does this person mean by this? So reading that fanfiction hit me with the fact that I may have had friends who were romantically interested in me, but I just did not pick it up at all. Both men and women. And I just didn't pick it up at all, but I still relegated them into that place of friendship. And eventually the friendships fizzled out or fell apart, and I got slammed with the you're not a caring enough friend. Now, you're probably wondering, what does being a caring enough friend have to do with not being able to pick other people's romantic interest in you or friends' romantic interest in you? It kind of relates, because it's not about the romantic interest. It's about being able to interpret other people's emotions, number one. Number two, being able to mirror those emotions when people share it. Being able to just pick up certain things that would classify under social emotional reciprocity, which is one of the DSM criteria for autistic people that they have, that theirs is low. Now, let's bring it all the way back to other mini essays I've been reading. I think a lot about my heroine journey, which is, I just watched a video on that and I have a couple of thoughts on that. I have been through my heroine's journey at different points in time and different phases, different steps of the heroine journey have taken years. Some have taken like literally like a realization and me embodying like a realization and taking action. Do you understand? And it hasn't really followed the sequence of the original author who wrote the book that the video I was watching was kind of like breaking down and discussing. So the original author is Maureen Murdoch, but it was breaking down, I think, patriarchy, the YouTube channel. She was going through that book and her own, experiences with that book and the insights he received her when her world crumbled. And I would say for someone from teenage years who had dedicated her life, lol, I'm just a baby, but yeah, I dedicated many moments of my life towards dismantling and decolonizing like my mind and my environment from like patriarchy and things and other things like that, and abuse and etc. To me, I will say that you're going on your heroine journey is oftentimes there's a step called I think it's called healing the mother-daughter splits. Okay, I think an urgent yearning to reconnect with the feminine. Every woman goes through an urgent yearning to reconnect with the feminine. And I will tell you one thing. A part of that urgent yearning to reconnect with the feminine is how many of us women, despite our very sometimes traumatic experiences in secondary schools or universities with other women, is us finding our own female friendships and finding our community and finding our tribe, in quote. And if you're someone who finds yourself completely kicked out of the tribe in a way repeatedly because you're a bad girlfriend or you're not caring enough or you just don't get it or whatever other reasons it is, that's and it's not that somebody locks the door and doesn't give you the password. It's a very gradual process which, if you've experienced it over time, it forms like a pattern you can almost recognize that you yourself, you begin to like check out, right? But again, part of your heroine's journey is healing the mother-daughter split. That means healing your mother wound and healing your mother wound, healing your mother wound and healing your mother-daughter splits, which is not just, now mother-daughter is more like an aspect of the feminine that you are expected to be differential to, who holds some form of authority. And this shifts, right? It's not only just your mother, it's your grandmother, it is nature itself, it is your relationship with your body, it is your relationship with other women around you, especially now living in the world that we live in, especially women who are powerful, women who have authority, women who have influence. They may not be older than you, they may just have access to certain things, certain spaces, whatever. If you have had a split with them, maybe because of whatever reason, it's also healing that split, right? It's kind of like reintegrating into femininity and its diverse plethora of it all in a way where you no longer feel disempowered, right? Now, how does all of this connect to, are you a bad girlfriend or are you just an undiagnosed autistic with CPTSD? I would then I need to cover all of the themes of this conversation that I will go into like my insights more deeply. So now then introduces another thing. I've talked about like things that would classify as you having low social emotional reciprocity, right? I listed a couple of things, so I'll go deeper into that later in this conversation. But CPTSD is something that I have had clocked since I think 2022 when I started doing more deeper healing on that concept specifically. And there's just this incredible conversation by Dr. Bora Tyler Marshall, and he wrote a Substack about it called The Unshaming of CPTSD, right? And it's like how capitalism and the shame of helplessness inhibit our ability to heal from trauma. Now, I'm not going to go deep into that, but what I will extract from that conversation is he lists that under capitalism, one of the biggest things you can ever, one of the biggest crimes you can ever commit is actually not even crime itself, but it's being helpless because of the repercussion of being helpless, right? So it's not about lacking morality, which is why it seems like, oh, I thought I was a good enough friend. I thought I was, to the best of, because when you are someone who is independent, emotionally independent, especially most autistic people tend to be emotionally independent, they can't be like you're a criminal because of, we see how patriarchy socializes women, where its impact on the psyche, right? And it is rewarded under capitalism. Let's be for real, where you as a woman need to foster codependency, emotional codependency, and to be someone who then performs emotional labor for others. It could be men, and it's the way we're raised, right? Even when that dynamic is not there, we see people intentionally manipulate emotional dynamics to create that codependent, very hyper transactional emotional dynamic through, and then they falsely label it as reciprocity and manipulate other people. How does this then relate to, I just mentioned how that insight came from me when I read him say, when Dr. Tyler Marshall said, what kills you in capitalism is not a lack of morality, but of having no resources. As such, the greatest sin in capitalism is not criminality, but powerlessness. Now, when you are autistic, your brain synapses how just what they are. They process things how exactly they are. You tend to be more emotionally independent. There's just certain ways with which you connect with people. Let me list a couple of things, then I will get to the C-PTSD part and the insights. So in Irene of the Thought Spot, she has a video essay also where she talks about why do autistic people seem so selfish. So she lists examples of low social emotional reciprocity, I think about 6 examples, and she argues that because we tend to be more dependent, we do things at our own pace, we find our responses usually go into meaning, structure, insights, and also we are not mirroring people instinctively, right? We are more like do it at our own pace, do our own thing. And we tend to oftentimes ruminate a lot, especially when you have ADHD. You tend to ruminate a lot, and you might practice metacognition. Like I said earlier at the start of this conversation, your ability to reflect on your own beliefs, which is the highest form of intelligence, even more higher than emotional intelligence. I'm always talking about emotional intelligence. At least 2025 was our year of learning emotional intelligence in the Connector Collective. So now, you cannot be a girly who is manifesting whatever it is you're manifesting, embodying abundance, which is your literal birthright. The fact that you are feminine, you are the embodiment of abundance. Abundance literally manifests through you. You are the embodiment of abundance. Like everything you do, you create, you amplify if you choose to. And of course, at the same time, sometimes abundance can come through destruction, where certain things need to be destroyed because they are a menace and they need to go so that there can actually be space for things to flourish abundantly. I said what I said. So now, examples of low social emotional reciprocity. She said, number 1, when a person shares something emotional but your response goes into meaning, structure, and insight. Initially, this is the traits that many autistic women, when you find another, like a friend, especially a female friend, I'm going to use a female friend because with female friendships, we see that women tend to have better in quotes relationships with themselves. They form more. Women offer each other a level of emotional depth, intimacy that oftentimes they cannot get from their male partners or men in their lives. Just like how women are socialized to carry out more emotional labor in relationships. So another woman tends to be the emotional home of another woman. And I see this a lot as a guide. Where sometimes my clients are accessing sessions not because there's something they specifically want to work through or something they would like to share as like they would like to fondly call it a progress report, exactly. But sometimes it's just that need to have that connection, that emotional connection that comes with meaning, structure, or insight. So when you are a young woman, especially when you're undiagnosed with autism or you're undiagnosed with ADHD, you can bring that meaning and structure with a bit of like freedom, chaos, or fun, depends if you have ADHD. It just depends on how you approach that. Initially, that trait is admired because it's traits that societally are socialized with men or the masculine. But I fully believe, we see with Murdoch's book, The Heroine Journey. At the end of the Heroine Journey, your step 10 is the union of both the masculine and the feminine, what that means for yourself. I've been in that state of union for over almost going on 2 years now, and I've had cycles. I don't like the word fluctuates, but I've definitely had rhythms where I've gone through the rhythms and the cycles of that in different capacities. That's a conversation for another day. If you want me to talk more on that, you can comment. But I will say that when you go through the step before you have the union of both the feminine and the masculine on your heroine journey, and what that manifests, where you've made peace with your internal expression and a reality of what is feminine and what is masculine, and you're grounded in that and not what patriarchy tells you need to have, so that you are a good enough resource that can be exploited under capitalism. Also, it is that before that step, there's step 9, which is called the reconciliation with the masculine. So oftentimes you are perceived as someone who has that healthy inner masculine that you have reconciled with the external, the world, the patriarchal, toxic masculinity. You give that perception because of how you, yet again, are someone who your emotional response goes into meaning, structure, or insight. But it's literally just how your brain is processing. Again, emotions are information. They're about energy. It's how your brain is processing energy, right? So this becomes interesting to note. I was going to list all the points, but I think I will just list the point and then connect it to the whole thing of how this impacts friendships within women, amongst or between women, and also the emotional labor we carry out in relationships with men also and other people. Now, when you look at CPTSD, oftentimes, or what people would call childhood trauma, there are just certain, like Dr. Bowen calls it certain tasks. I do not know the name of the host of. I would just refer to her as the host of Breaking Down Patriarchy when I need to refer to her own conversations and her own insights, because she's the one who was, I wouldn't call it reviewing the book, but it was her outlining her own hero's journey using the book by Maureen Murdoch, right? So I think those are the points of our conversations. I don't remember the name of the fan fiction that I read that gave me that insight of, I had friends that were romantically interested in me and I never clocked it, which takes me back to another point on the DSM about low social emotional reciprocity and whatnot. But let's talk about CPTSD for a minute. So I said this is a term I'd come across a couple of years, 2022, 2021, when I started my own healing, digging deeper. I'll use the word digging deeper. I think it was 2023, not 2021. I'd come across the terminology, but I didn't start working on healing modalities specifically for CPTSD till on a deeper level till 2022, where I had that crumbling moment. I left a field I was dedicated to, again, women's rights, legislative advocacy. I left a field that was deeply dedicated to leaving behind a lot of what would have been called my women who were part of my community in a way, because back to another part of the low socioeconomic reciprocity, where you don't I need to look for it, where okay, hold on, I'm checking my notes, where you don't instinctively take part of perform emotional caretaking, number one, and also the fact that you are someone who, if you do not relate to something, you are not, yes, if you do not share parallel experiences, you cannot really offer verbal reassurances. And this impacts relationships with women because women, again, like I said, the way we're socialized with emotional labor, with our emotional health, we're oftentimes socialized emotional health to be codependent, to be the person who co-regulates or regulates other people in our community, other people around us, with proximity to oftentimes men. But part of deconstructing, or many of us decentering men, is we shift that to other women in our lives. Instead of learning that it's not about the codependence, it's about you regulating yourself and you holding that center of energetic power within yourself, and that you are so influential that that would then ripple out, kind of like how our hearts have, this frequency, it radiates out within us within, I think, 3,000 mile radius or so. I can't remember the exact figure. And how our nervous system also has its own frequency field. So when you center yourself and you regulate yourself and you influence other people without having to create codependent structures or regulate another person's emotion, which is what Irene of the Thought Pots in her video speech argues for, that a lot of neurotypical ways of emotional reciprocity, social emotional reciprocity, actually borders on codependency, often is transactional and can lead towards manipulation and unhealthy, which is codependency obviously is unhealthy. We want interdependence, I think. What's the phrase? But yeah. So now back to CPTSD. Now with CPTSD, childhood trauma, if you're a first daughter, you probably grew up as a parentified child. So the things I needed to heal when I was around healing was the parentified child, the parentified child, which is an aspect of the mother wound. Also, what's the other one? The parentified child and, it literally just skipped my head. Emotional enmeshment. Yes, emotional enmeshment to a specific degree. Yes, so those are the two things. Now, back to Dr. Bowen again. Dr. Bowen says that there are three, I think he lists three shame tax rather. I think he said the first one is when we view ourselves as, we have the belief that we allowed ourselves to be hurt. Now, I don't know about you, but if you've had a friendship breakup, it kind of mirrors this three shame tax. As I was listening, I was like, female friendship breakups, or friendship breakup is like your girlfriends, your female friends, platonic female friends now, not romantic, because I will still talk more on like romantic. Homo, will I use the word homo? I wouldn't use the word homoerotic. I would use the word, because women's relationships, there's also, there's a lot to unpack. But let's go. Because I just had an insight right now with how, when you look at female friendships, they offer so much emotional support. It's borderline romantic. It's borderline homoerotic. It is borderline. And for a gender who are sexual, we are socialized sexually, that emotion should be the connection to sexuality. We are like, sexuality is has to be this emotional, moralized thing, which many women are breaking out of. Thank God. Like, I know I was like, I joke about a lot with a couple of friends. I'm so happy I had like my slut phase or whatever, and thank God for retirement also, because every woman needs to reclaim her sexuality, sexual expression, and even investigate your sexual orientation. Okay, so that being said, Dr. Bowen mentioned three shame tax. I've mentioned the first one, where we believe ourselves to have been hurt, where you're like, how could I have been so stupid? Like, when you have that friendship breakup, you begin to analyze like, I should have known better, when they list these things, and there's this for women who are healing C-PTSD and are undiagnosed autistic, or they are diagnosed, or you're self-diagnosed, let me now shift to those who are self-diagnosed or reflecting from a place of self-diagnosis or medically diagnosed on when they were undiagnosed. You are like, I should have known better. In the moment when that happens, though, most likely you're undiagnosed, most likely you've not started your healing journey with C-PTSD, you are defensive and you reject it. A part of you sees what the person is saying, but a part of you rejects it that is not for the reason you're doing it. The part of you that sees what the person is saying is a part of you who, again, who then takes that lesson or whatever cause of the friendship breakup and goes, if I had just done this would never have happened again. Right now, this is us still holding on to shame about childhood trauma or tragic things that happen to us when we're children. The second shame tax is not being able to heal ourselves after each reoccurrence of abuse or neglect. So we see situations where, again, if you are somebody who the way with which you are, back to talking about autism and social emotional reciprocity, if you're someone who your response to emotions expression or whatever somebody's saying is you go into meaning, structure, or insight, this second shame tax really can hit you. This shame tax, the second one, can really hit you because you're thinking, you begin to girl, that word just took me out, but you know what I mean. You begin to think, you begin to inspect. You literally are like a surgeon who takes your surgical tools to your brain, to your memory, to your mind, and you're just on the operating table. You are like, I need to find meaning, I need to find insight, I need some form of structure, like what is going on, like what is the matter with me, like why like they shouldn't be this upset. You're really trying to figure out without really giving, like, because you feel like I need to have that answer to heal. But the answer has always been there. Of course, right at this moment you don't know that answer, but you need that answer to heal, in the sense that oftentimes when you are someone who, that is how you are interpreting emotion, you're responding to emotional responses, over time, you become the person where that other person forms a codependent bond with in a specific aspect. They might be frustrated with you with other aspects, which I would list. Aspects like you are not being able to mirror the other person's emotion, so therefore you're not seen as caring. As in, a friend is just distressed about something, and you, again, another point that oftentimes happens to me is you not being able to match their emotional tone in real time. So sometimes a particular friend could reach out to me and is having this whatever distressing, sharing whatever distressing occurrence is happening, and I'm really just there. I can't mirror that distress because my mind's already looking for meaning, is looking for structure, is looking for insights. Like I'm trying to, like, what's the insights with like how they're expressing themselves this way? I'm thinking, what does this mean? So I'm waiting for them to like share more. In the process of waiting for them to share more, I don't automatically match their emotional tone of distress in real time. And because I'm not doing that, I'm seen as I don't really care. And if they say certain things in that moment, I might skip those small emotional signals and wait for real substance. Do you see how this is all connected? And that comes from a part where, again, back to what Irene argues in her video on why do autistic people seem so selfish. It's because you, and the way your brain, your synapses are interpreting information, you are coming from a place of dependence. And especially for someone who is not just only autistic, but you have ADHD, you begin to what's it called? The ADHD part of you is a part of you that has multiple interests, interested in a lot of things. And I remember I mentioned something about life path number 5 under numerology. When you're someone who your life path is 5, path 5 is a part of the healer, the artist, the creative, the person who desires freedom, craves freedom but also desires like stillness, stability, balance. You are the intellect, you're intellectual, and some other people who have that life path on the odd numbers like 1, like 3, like 7, like 9. You get where I'm going with this? But specifically life path number like 5 specifically. Again, like I said, this conversation is me just like having like a summary of all of the different like things I've read, videos, and in like different healing modality practices that I'm studying, and my insights on them. Now, we talked about all of this conversation was related to the second shame tax, where you can't seem to heal because you can't seem to get what is, I don't know what the next friend is going to say about me. I don't know what's the next thing this person is going to say. There's this form on uncertainty, and not in the fun ADHD kind of way, but like in a way that would repel you as someone who is, again, you need that structure, you like routines, there's safety in that, which still connects to the fact that people who have AuDHD to a large extent, and women who are autistic they have more independence, more like self-dependence, more, I would argue, emotional grounding, like ways with which I had struggled with my emotional power or intelligence, or how I perceive them as struggles in the past, till a lot of just like healing, learning, and training since 2024. My perception of those things have shifted. It's not that they were a struggle, they were my own unique self-expression. They were powerful. If they weren't powerful, they wouldn't have been exploited by people, right? But it was that I didn't know how to utilize them for my benefit. I didn't know how to protect myself, and I didn't understand how much more codependent, transactional, manipulative, and exploitative the world structure is, and how that also leads to how neurotypical people process information or carry out social emotional reciprocity. Now, the third shame tax is that you allowed your identity to be shaped by abuse or neglect that you experienced. Now, I think we at this point we all know that when people are in certain situations, they adapt to survive, and those adaptive strategies, systems, habits, mindsets stay with them even when they leave those situations. What people say being stuck in survival mode, and we shifting out of survival mode to more to like this growth, abundance, empowered place, is us dropping this question we ask ourselves all the time: how could I let this impact me so deeply? Now, this is something people who are healing from CPTSD, some of the shame taxes they carry. Here's the interesting thing: that question, how could I let this impact me deeply? Let's be honest. If you're a woman and you've had a friendship breakup, you've also asked yourself this question. Now, I started this whole conversation by asking, are you a bad girlfriend or female friend? Or were you an undiagnosed, a young woman with undiagnosed either autism or ADHD with unhealed C-PTSD? So I wanted to just share those 3 shame tags that, Dr. Bowen argues that we will find ourselves in a precarious state of denial, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation or attempts, substance abuse, because we have that unmitigated shame to blame, righteous blame, as he argues. Of course, I'm not going more deeply into that. If you want my own mini essay on his own conversation, I don't know if I'll tell you. I don't know if I'll share with you, but you could ask. I don't know if we want to do that, a thing where you want me to share mini essays from the week. I always, like I said in my last conversation, I try to write them. I haven't written for these ones. I will, but I don't know. This might actually be the writing or the writing I'll do this conversation. But now we have an idea of like how CPTSD and the shame of that impacts us as people, and we know how. Many markers of how trauma stunts. I like the word stunts because, again, survival mode, things can't really grow, and you don't really have a healthy perception of things because you're just have tunnel vision per se. And we've had this conversation on Connector, the Substack, one of our past healing letters, I think in 2024 or early 2025. Now, back to that. If you are now, let me bring all of this home, right? We've had like a glimpse of all of the different things I'd read and listened to. Now let's bring this back home to me. For me, again, like I said, I had a moment of metacognition where I had an insight which just made me review unanswered questions. Like, I fully believe my brain has a tab of questions that are left unanswered, emotional reactions of people that I still haven't interpreted, and that tab is just somewhere open in my brain. And anytime my body or the insight or what I learn has an answer that matches a question unanswered in that tab, my brain literally opens that specific tab and that specific memory and just matches it and finally solves the case, like a Sherlock Holmes kind of thing. So, or in Nancy Drew, I was such a huge fan of Nancy Drew. Let me say Nancy Drew kind of moment, right? Now, for somebody who has to heal from parentified child, basically the first daughter within a Nigerian home is trained to carry the emotional labor and even physical labor of a full-grown adult woman to support her parents, whether they're together or not, to take care, to parent people younger than her. But this is someone whose brain is not fully developed. This is somebody who should have been left to like be a child or whatever. So circumstances cause this. Nobody sets out to be a parent. Well, some people do, but nobody sets out to be C-PTSD, excuse again. But yeah, some people do. Because if you completely intentionally keep doing something because it's the only way you know to do better, then we can't say you don't know better. Like, yeah, that's what you know and that's what you're choosing to do. Even when, whatever. So, Dr. Bowen says something. He has a paragraph that says, this is why acknowledging or talking about or working to heal from C-PTSD is not a selfish act as we're told by our oppressors. So when people want to work on certain things, it's seen as selfish. It's seen as, one is oftentimes guilted. But asking for acknowledgement and restitution when someone has hurt you intentionally or unintentionally is never selfish. Back to what I was saying. It can be. Selfishness is defined as a lack of consideration. Oppressed people cannot be selfish towards their oppressors because they cannot act without considering them. This just perfectly explains what I'm trying to say. Oftentimes, people, back to what Irene's conversation on why do autistic people seem selfish, where she's talking about the conception under the DSM about low socioeconomic, I don't know why I'm calling it economics, but yeah, emotions is like wealth. Emotional wealth is the economics of womanhood. Okay, let's talk about that in another conversation. But the woman, I love that. So, but yeah, with women, we're socialized to be selfless, right? Where we do not consider the self, but instead we consider other people. So it's like if you don't consider other people, you're selfish. But the irony is that the very act of you not considering yourself, of you not healing your C-PTSD, of you not addressing whatever it is that needs to be addressed, acknowledging things, seeking for restitution. Remember our heroine's journey, where we have to work on, I think, healing the mother-daughter split is the step 9 of the heroine's journey. And also back with like the feminine, where I made a reference point on how the feminine is like the different women in our lives, including nature, which becomes vitally important in this this AI tech permitted capitalist world where we're all working our asses off to earn a living, oftentimes detached from nature of itself. Early, I'll tell you one thing. When I worked my very hectic job years ago, what truly really gave me delight were the moments when I would leave in work and going to work or in the mornings where I could see the sunrise to the bus, or in the evening see the sunset while waiting on the BRT queue for the bus, or just the wind as I walk over the pedestrian bridges, watch people watching people talk, interact, the traffic, the cityscape, and also the joy of like the trees in my neighborhood when I walk back home. So that connection to nature around you. Now, what does this even have to do, back to what I was saying with like with the conversation on like selfishness? You cannot act without considering other people, and I think it's the point of which brings us back to the low social emotional reciprocity argument under the DSM for autistic people or people with ADHD, where they say, oh, okay, because you're not interpreting, because you're not immediately being transactional, where if you do not share parallel experiences, instead of, you cannot offer verbal assurance, meaning, remember that by Billie Eilish song, Happier Than Ever, where she says, I don't relate to you. Do you feel me? Like, I don't know if you're a woman like that, you've had conversations with friends that are just going off and off, and at the back of your head, you can't relate to this. Not because you're looking for the meaning of whatever they're saying, looking for some form of structure or a pattern you can recognize and offer like an insight. Not because of that, but it's because like you cannot instinctively offer emotional caretaking, because it should be somebody else offering that to themselves. Somebody else has to move through that. Somebody else has to process that emotions. Unfortunately, women are so exhausted by performing that co-regulating men, performing emotional labor. They do not even have energy for themselves to do that for themselves, so they outsource it to other women in their community, in their life, and then they exhaust those women. You would see many, and this is a popular phrase, especially looking at older women, because they form like my clientele. They say when, they may come to connect her to buy product with a friend, then over time, I would want to do like some friendship kind of like gifting, whatever, or ask about their friend. And they will always say this phrase in Yoruba, which I will translate to English, which is like her stress is too much. What that woman is basically saying that she is emotionally exhausted from that relationship. Like the codependent nature, the hyper-transactional nature of that relationship, which you would see under a lot of neurotypical relationships, which just mirror patriarchy and like capitalism and colonialism, where things are to be extracted without respect, and where there's no celebration of independence, of your own pacing, of your own timing, of what you consider, which is, I think, is leading to why there's a breakdown of like friendship and even like the traditional home structure, the nuclear family. I don't even think families should be operating in a nuclear way. I think it should be more of a rounded village way, but like many people are not ready or capable for the emotional independence and the social accountability needed to operate as a village. And that's coming from me, who has been somebody who has been not only a community builder, but an archiver of like community movements, as someone who has offered fundamental financial and also socio-economical support to like different communities within like human rights advocacies, from women's own to in relation to women in digital or tech spaces, to even like the LGBTQ community. Wow, this conversation is really going hard, but at the crux of it all is the insight that I had is like, it's not that I was a bad friend. It was that on one hand, because I had unhealed C-PTSD, my ego was all consuming. Whatever anyone said, an attack on an ego was perceived as an attack on my whole persona. Do you understand what I mean? Like, it was like an attack on our own persona, and it added to the shame of other things one has been struggling with. Another aspect is, it's not that I was talking when you're sharing something, because autism, you can't relate with parallel experiences versus just only giving verbal assurance or reassurance, that means that I am more likely to talk a lot, talk about things if it quips things that are of my interest, things that are philosophical, things that things that are systemic. I could talk about that. And that was one of the repeated issue. I had to actually, when I had healed my PTSD and stayed in a place of like alignment with my healed self, I was able to really reduce that. I still saw that coming up, and I was actually guilting myself, like, oh no, I'm still holding on to this thing from CPTSD. But now I'm reflecting that I'm not like I was holding on to this thing from PTSD. That was actually like my autistic brain processing information in a particular way. And I was talking with a client last week about how I have systems. I call it like the check system, where I know how my brain is processing information, ADHD and also autism, but I also know that I have healed CPTSD, and I know that I'm someone who had struggled with like anxiety, and at the same time I have spiritual gifts. So I have a system of checks. I call it like this Venn diagram, where I'm trying to find X. Where do all of these things overlap? And where do all of these things overlap, which is the X? And how does this information that I'm now imputing into this Venn diagram relate to X? Is this information X, or is this information completely just distinctively uniquely just one cycle or one part of like my experiences? In summary, this whole conversation, if you thank you for staying so far. In summary, this whole conversation is sometimes we are put under pressure to perform emotional reciprocity, love, and care. I use the word perform because it comes a performance when you're not doing it on your own terms, you're not doing it at your own time, and you're not doing it with like this best loving interests coming from as much as of what you understand from a friend. You understand what I mean? When you are pressured to do it because somebody else kind of like gaslights you to do it, somebody else manipulates you to do it by asking you first how you doing, so that you can then ask them how they do, so they can dump like the most horrific traumatic thing they are casually going through in a romantic relationship, which if you then proceed to break them down, they then tell you like, no, that's not it, whatever, it's not that deep, it's not that serious, whatever, and continue perpetrating that, exposing you to trauma, especially if they don't know if you are healing from CPTSD. So exposing you by using your emotional support, the way you offer it, the way you don't offer it, but still just dumping all of that on you, which just is triggering. Let me use that word. It's triggering. And I know, like, for me, that was one of the issues I had with one of my really good friends, to the extent where I even just stopped asking them like back, like, oh, how you doing back, because to me, I process a lot of my emotions independently. Look at that, emotional processing. And I have high emotional intelligence, which is different from, you know what, I'm just gonna say it. Oftentimes people, especially women who have to heal through the mother wound, women that have to deal with being parentified children, women that have to deal with emotional enmeshment, you are actually highly emotionally intelligent. Unfortunately, it has been of service to other people. Oftentimes, maybe, the neglectful parents, oftentimes the parent you're enmeshed with, oftentimes a manipulative or a narcissistic parent. But you have that too, and there's nothing wrong, there's nothing bad in that. Obviously, the more work you do, the more healing you do, the more deconstruction you do, the more decolonizing you do, the more of shedding the shame you do at the base, more of that independence, more of that your own timing, more of that selfishness in quotes comes up, where you are self-preservation comes up. I prefer the word self-preservation because I was having a conversation with my sister and she was like, it's not even about selfishness, it's not even it's about self-priority, self-preservation first, like the self first, put yourself first. And she just kept, this is like self first, and that just stuck with me. I love. I recently went on a trip to see her, so I absolutely love like the conversations we had, reflecting on like things, on how we had to like decenter some versions of femininity and masculinity that our mom modeled for us, which I think is so fascinating. My sister's doing that work, because even my mom herself is doing that work also. And so it is, like I said, in 2025, it is a year of the whole woman. The whole woman is a woman you need in this age of wisdom and industrialized skill set. That is your greatest access, and that is the heroine you meet at the end of your heroine's journey. So I want to just encourage you right now that you are not selfish. Because people still form a part of your consideration, and the first person you're considering is yourself first. How you show up for people, how you show up for yourself actually is the way you actually show up for people, and that I think is very special, is very incredible. If people want to manipulate you always to access those key specific attributes you have, how you process things, how you hold space for people, I think it's so interesting, because now in my work as an emotional healing guide, the way I am able to keep my emotional tone and while listening to people, which is one of the things on the DSM, examples of, in quotes, I don't think it's low socioeconomic reciprocity. I think it's just a different form. Do you get? Yes. So the way I'm able to hold space by like keeping my emotional tone while listening to others has become an invaluable skill set for me as a guide. And I like, because people really can just feel I truly am holding that space for them. I'm holding my economic independence, my emotional independence. Again, economics. Why is economics chasing me, gems? Yeah. So I'm able to hold my emotional independence and energetic sovereignty, which allows other people to feel safe, stable, and free. And here's the thing, I think because many women are socialized not to ask for what they want because they are guilted into thinking whatever they desire or want is too much. It puts excessive pressure on female friendships where you expect someone to automatically be transactional with their reciprocity. Like you think like, if I do this, you should do this for me too. That's very manipulative, by the way, and also unhealthy, very, very unhealthy. I'm just going to end this particular auditory essay by saying, on one hand, yeah, you can heal by you can heal C-PTSD, heal things like not personalizing observations or criticism, or feedback, yes. Not personalizing feedback as criticism or abuse, because the C-PTSD, hypersensitive to how people have used feedback as feedback instead as criticism, instead as a way to abuse one, as a way to manipulate one into performing or behaving a particular way. You can heal that. But at the same time, you can also understand that a part of ADHD is that you have rejection sensitivity syndrome. Like two things can be true at the same time. You can heal that. Feedback is just information, and my sense of self, someone else's perception of my sense of self or my actions is actually their own nervous system reacting to the energy of me. It's not actually me. While the observation can be useful for you to check on, how you want to be more present in a relationship, you should not let that rejection sensitivity that comes with ADHD and your life experiences block you from really building like healthy community at your own pace that is healthy. And I think cycle syncing has really helped me a lot with that. Just like how I cycle syncing, I understand how my hormones, my nutrition, and even my lifestyle goes through 4 phases. Same way with like the energy I have available to me at each phase kind of like helps me know how I want to reciprocate, or even just initiate certain acts of care or social, emotional, like reciprocity to people in my community, it shifts. I know like I'm about to be self-preserved, self-first during my menstruation and last few days of my luteal phase, versus when I'm in like ovulation, where like, okay girls, it's a party, just show up, yourself only, yourself only, yourself only, I've got this. I know you don't need to do anything you're not ready to do, you do not want to do, to thank me or to reciprocate, in quotes. So you can admit that there are certain ways with which your friends also neglected you. They did not understand you because you didn't understand you didn't have a way to ideate parts of yourself, like put parts of yourself in into words, which you may not have had then that you have now. And at the same time, you can understand that we as women, as a social class under like the world systems, CPR, have to heal. We have a lot of healing to do, and we have a lot of alignment to do. Many of these things can be true, and self-preservation is not bad, it's not wrong. You being emotionally independent is sovereign, emotional sovereignty. Oh, chef's kiss. You need it. You not knowing how to regulate yourself, setting boundaries so that key aspects of how you are, how you function, how you process is not exploited by people who then tend to be codependent on you, or even neglect your own needs because they're there to enjoy all these things for you, critic it, but then they don't show up for you the way you need. For example, during my trip with my sister, there was just a moment where she was so busy at work, and I had work to do also that involved a lot of like audio, and I knew just being around her, I would be interrupting her and she'd be interrupting me. And the fact that I could go to another space in our home, in a beautiful home, go to another space in our home and just do my thing, and there was no guilt, there was nothing. And when we were both done, we like cooked a meal together and we just spent time with each other. Ugh. Talk about two women like fulfilling each other, like being in community, offering social, emotional reciprocity. Do you understand? And there was another moment where we were just together and she was just like, I'll just stay around me. And she knew I needed that silence, and she was doing her own thing and I was doing my own thing, and we were both working in silence. And I just fully feel like so fed for my trip with her. Like, it's those moments for me, like those are my emotional needs and they were met. And just like moments where I had to just stay and listen to her, talk. Do you feel me? Like, it's two-way things. If they say you are a bad girlfriend or a bad female friend, okay. But were they good to you too? Again, remember, like, Unhealed C-PTSD will always have you considering them only or first. And it would put you in a place when you're undiagnosed with autism to not understand how you experience things, how you communicate things is different from how many neurotypical things people do. So that is the end of this auditory essay. That is a culmination of over 10 pieces of incredible media, about 5 that I think I specifically highlighted. Yeah, 5. If you want me to post the links, should I post the links? Do you want me to? Do you need it? Not to my own personal mini essays, but to these source materials that are part of this conversation. Then, yeah, the researcher in me wants to anyway, I will. All right, gems, have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day. Remember that you are deserving and you are the abundance. All right? You are the abundant resource, as I always say. Bye, gems.